there was a social contract that existed between the players and the fans. Those of us that did love it. It was ridiculous. It was silly. There was, Shaq would try to cross someone up and pull up for three. We did not expect high level basketball for 4 quarters. Go out, do your
Yeah.
fun, don't get injured. We got all of it. But there was a social contract that basically then said, keep it close and give us 12 minutes of basketball. Give us
Yeah.
12 minutes at the end. And in 2020, they upheld that social contract. The NBA All-Star game in Chicago, it was right after Kobe Bryant died. Team Giannis against Team LeBron. Half the team was wearing Kobe's jersey number. Half the guys were wearing Gianna's number. And I think because of that, they also did the Elam ending and maybe some of the history of Chicago mattered. I have no idea. The game was 157, 155, and the fourth quarter was entertaining. That's all we want. Like, I I don't think I'm asking for a lot that I hear these guys on all of their podcasts, including Draymond's. He will talk about unbelievable pickup run that gets organized in LA in the offseason. I see it on YouTube. Kevin Durant showing up at the Drew League or at Rucker Park and just balling out with
Yeah.
non-NBA players and trying and playing hard. So I don't think it is too much to ask. Does it matter? Does it affect the ratings or the drop in the bucket, as you call it? No. But somewhere along the way, the social contract was broken of just try for 12 minutes and manipulate the game to be close and play competitive pickup basketball. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to ask of gazillionaire athletes. I really don't.
Sorry to interrupt this great video, but please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you. Now back to the video. You know, some of what the NBA is going through, I always feel like by the way, you get this in other businesses. If something happens, it happens in threes, and the NBA is going through a run of, ratings news isn't
Yeah.
good, and the NBA All-Star game is bad, and nobody is watching. And I think they're going through this, and I think a lot of it will be forgotten because I think the Knicks and the Celtics will play an unbelievable Eastern Conference
Right.
Finals and nobody will
Yeah.
care.
The playoffs
And
should
I
be great.
think Luca and LeBron will connect, and the Lakers will get to the Western Conference Finals, and nobody will care. How much of this is, listen, it's just the league's always been driven by aesthetics. And right now, the aesthetics aren't good. The game's a little monotonous. The NBA All Star game was ugly and boring. Some of this is just bad PR. It may not have no effect long term, but companies go through this. Nike's gone through it where just like bad comes in three. How much of it's
think
that?
I think a lot of it, but I think that there's like two separate conversations that are happening on parallel tracks that can coexist and feel like they are in conflict with each other, but are not. To your point, this happens to a lot of businesses and a lot of industries. The business of basketball is objectively very healthy. The players have guaranteed contracts. The talent is insane. The contracts are locked in. The Charlotte franchise just went for billions of dollars. Like the league is healthy. That
Yeah.
is the left parallel track. And then the right parallel track is those of us that watch, that love the NBA, can acknowledge regular season doesn't really matter. It's one of 82. Playoffs are a completely different sport. I just did the numbers on the show today on Breakfast Ball. There are 5 more threes being attempted this year than last year. And that's just 1 year. Now we're at 74.7 threes attempted per game on average. And do you know what that has led to? More blowouts, results that have been decided by 20 or more points than
Yeah.
any other time in NBA history before the All-Star break. There have already been 168 NBA games that have been decided by 20 or more points. And that makes sense. You're taking a high variance shot. One team has a good shooting night, one team has a bad shooting night, but 3 is worth more than 2, so everyone is trying to hit threes. You have a hot night, the other team has a bad night, you get a blowout. That's not an entertaining product. So I feel like two things can be
Right.
true. The product is healthy and the product is not at its best. Why are those two things necessarily in conflict with each other?
Yeah. Listen, there There are a lot of things. Steve Kerr pointed this out. It wasn't that long ago when he pointed out that AAU basketball is not helping the
Yeah.
product. It's not. It's tracksuit Tony trying to make a livelihood of it, and the players don't benefit. And the European system is much better. That's part of it. I do think something that does help the NBA in the near future is the NIL will keep a lot of kids in college one more year. A kid can make $4 million at Duke or Carolina. Why go to a crappy team?
Sure.
Live on a college campus. I think that'll help because the one thing the NFL has always realized and leaned into is college football is free marketing. I've said this before, like water's free medicine. College football is free marketing for the NFL. Adam Silver got into office, and there was almost they tried to marginalize college basketball. The players weren't getting paid. College football players don't get paid for 3 or 4 years, and they get tackled. Like it's okay. Like I don't pay my interns on my show. That's just part of 16 to 21
RT Kill Trap.
years old or 19 years
Thank you
old.
for the follow. I see you.
So I do think that will help the NBA. I think the NBA, the quality of basketball is good. I think the league is making a lot of money. I think NBC probably out of somewhat desperation overshot the runway a little bit on that contract. I don't know how they make that work, but they're trying to make Peacock grow against Amazon and Netflix and Disney and all that stuff. So, but that's not an NBA issue. I do think college basketball is an ally. March Madness. I mean, good God, Caitlin Clark comes into the WNBA. Her and Angel Reese are arguably the two most popular players.
Right. I think you and I have talked baseball before on the show, and not to name drop, but Theo Epstein and I had a pretty good working relationship when he was in Chicago running the Cubs. And
there's something about that.
The smartest sports.
LeBron James was the most famous player. LeBron James was the most famous player other than Kobe before he even started in the league. The anticipation was crazy. They need to already kind of be a little bit famous before they even hit the league. You gotta want to see their whole career. We got to watch LeBron James' whole career.
Executive I've ever talked to, for sure.
And with these international players, we just don't care. We have no connection with these international players.
Stevens would be a close second. And Brad Stevens is not going to give up his job right now. But I do think that there would be something that the NBA would benefit from, and Theo and I had this conversation on air and off air. When he ran the Cubs, his job was to exploit the rules in the interest of winning. His job was not to put the most entertaining product on the field. It was to win.
Right.
So strikeouts were okay if you got a lot of walks and home runs. 3 true outcome, and it was objectively not as entertaining of a product. The ball was in play less. There was more time between pitches. The games were interminably long. You would change pitchers every batter. 7, 8, 9 pitchers would get into a game per team. But that was what the numbers said gave them the best chance to win. The same thing has happened in basketball with 3 is worth more than 2. But I bring up the baseball point was because who spearheaded all of the rules changes? Theo Epstein. As soon as he left the Cubs, he's like, well, I care about baseball. So I'm going to close the loopholes that I exploited. 3 batter minimum, pitch clock, bigger bases, things to incentivize the things that he had. And if he gets a job running the Nashville expansion team or a Vegas, whoever, he will then go right back to exploiting the rules to try to win. So someone should get in the league office and try to figure out, because we've talked about it before. I don't know if it's making 3s worth 4 and 2s worth 3. I don't know if it's making dunks worth 3. I don't know if it's expanding the court and making the 3-point line 25 feet, 27 feet. I don't know what the solution is, but as long as 3 is 50% more than 2 and teams are trying to win, as long as those 2 things exist, you're not going to get less 3-pointers in the game unless you change a rule or 2 or 3. So that is just like the fundamental fact of the math of basketball.
That was this week's Tastiest Matchup, brought to you by Uber Eats as the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Uber Eats has the best, absolute best game day deals all season long. I use it every Sunday. Order now for game day. What's fascinating to me, and I've always really appreciated this, is that it takes baseball and even the NBA a while to make changes. The NFL, which is a runaway
Oh, yeah.
leader in all these sports, is tweaking during Super Bowls. I mean, they have such an underdog spirit. I mean, they could so easily be arrogant like baseball and say for 20 years, just we're going to do World Series games at 8:50 p.m. Let's start
Right.
them then. The Super Bowl is the opposite. They act like they're Division II hockey trying to get eyeballs. They will change rule, and I think they'll change rules. I mean, the Super Bowl with the Eagles and the Patriots, they changed the catch rule in the Super Bowl. Suddenly juggled things. It was 6. It was a touchdown.
Yeah.
It's like, well, right? No offseason needed. They just changed it. So, and I think in the spirit, I've always defended the NFL. It's a really well-run league. The kickoff was fine. Boring, but fine. Tweaked it. PAT was fine. Boring. Tweaked it. The tush push, I think they will ultimately examine because
God,
it's
I hope
just
so.
not good. It's just boring. And again, people get all upset. Why are you punishing us? It's just the way life
Correct.
works. I mean, the bottom line, if somebody takes an advantage and it hurts the quality of entertainment, leagues take it out. But I do think that when it comes to the NFL, we look at it and we go, well, it's popular because it's once a week. No, that helps. I'm not denying that. But they have so pulled away from the other sports. And a lot of, Danny, I think is they really appreciate we are a television
Yes.
product. They're really good at that.
And they mess up, and then they undo their mess up. Remember the NFC Championship game with the Saints with the bad pass interference call?
Yeah,
They
yeah,
made
yeah.
pass interference reviewable, and I was like, "Oh, that's a terrible idea." And it was. It was a terrible idea. But they walked it back
Yes.
basically immediately. So they changed
Yeah.
it too fast, and then they're like, "Oh, we overreacted." And then they changed it right back. And now listen, NFL players don't like their commissioner. They don't trust their owners. They don't have guaranteed contracts. They kind of get ruled under, an iron fist. And so there's a trade-off to like, we're going to slow play some of these changes. We're going to empower players to have a voice in it and all that. The NFL does not care about any of that. They're like, no, no, no. You're doing it our way. These are the rules. And if you want to collectively bargain for less practice in July, go right ahead. We care about the television product.
Right.
But no, the NFL is king for a ton of reasons. And I'm with you. That is one of them. Again, you and I have talked about this before. You've got an in-season tournament. They are changing the jerseys in the court. Change some rules. Just experiment with it. It's okay. I know they count in the regular season for the standings, but it's okay. It's 1 of 82. Like, let's just see what it would look like for 5 games per team with no corner 3. Let's just see it. Like, I don't know. I don't know what'll happen. Let's just see it. Floor's always been 96 feet. Let's make it 106 feet and make the 3-point line 25 feet. Let's just see it for 2 weeks. See what happens.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the things I like about change is you get an answer.
Yes.
Right. Like even if it's the wrong answer, General Schwarzkopf, the 4-star, 5-star general talked about that at one point. He said, make decisions just to figure out if it's right or wrong. Like you just inactivity, it's finger pointing, it's guessing. And he was talking about that in regards to military, either exercises or moves. And I feel like sometimes like when baseball, for instance, when Fox sold the regional sports networks, the Murdochs sold it. It's one of the smartest moves in the history of television. It was literally worth half as much the next day and basically worth nothing a month later. So, and they made like 20 billion. But in a weird way, you look at it and think, man, it's really hurt the small market teams, Kansas City and Pittsburgh. What it did, though, it separated small from big teams. And now the Yankees, the Mets, the Dodgers, the Houston, the Braves, if you're not good as a big market team, you're just poorly run or poorly owned.
Right.
Is that in a weird way, baseball just had a great 2 years, ratings up, attendance up, and everybody's like, oh, those. And so, like when you make moves and there's mergers and there's sales, There's a winner, there's a loser. But if you're baseball, if I'm Fox, I do not care about Kansas City. What I
you and
care
I
about
disagree
is
on this one because I do. Because again, I think that there is a breaking point of greed that you still have to put a good product out there. And like the World Series was great, no doubt. But I think that part of what makes the NFL awesome, maybe the number one thing. The number one thing is probably what you said. 18-game season, every game matters. That's probably the biggest thing. But like a 1B of that is that, what do you think? 28 of 32 teams when they report for training camp believe at the very least they can make the playoffs. Like if the right thing bounces their way and they can get to 9-8 or 10-7, like
NFL's the league of hope.
Baseball is not. Like baseball has a serious problem, in my opinion, where a third of the league has no chance not only of being competitive, but of even like being relevant when school is out, when kids could go to the game. And then like if you're Pittsburgh, okay, you got Paul Skeens. Your chances of signing him are almost zero. So like I do think that the haves and have-nots of baseball has gotten too out of whack. I know you and I just disagree. Stars, big markets, TV ratings on the biggest games. I get all of that.
Yeah.
And this is a juvenile argument. It's just lame that the Dodgers get everybody. Like it's just lame. Like it's like they get everybody because they happened to sign the last great RSN TV contract before the bubble burst. And like, don't get me wrong, they're run exceptionally well and they're a good organization, maybe the best organization. But it's just, it flies in the face of competitive spirit that they just get everybody because they lucked into a television contract based on timing. So you and I will disagree on that baseball point.
Well, and there are moments, like for instance, I think you cannot legislate even. College football playoff proved it. You can invite more teams in. Notre Dame plays Indiana. Game was over in 4 minutes.
No
right?
doubt.
Like,
There's always going to be a have and have-nots, and I'm not naive to that. No doubt.
I mean, women's tennis my entire life, there's been one or two tops globally. You know, Serena, she's just going to win all the big tournaments mostly. And I think, you know, if you go look at, you could go look at the German soccer leagues, you can go look at the English Premier League, the Italian soccer league, Spanish soccer league. It's always the same two teams. I mean, I think the reality of sports is I read this recently. Somebody said the NBA worries about problems that don't exist. Like they said, let's cut the length of quarters. Nobody cared. I think sometimes in sports, one of the things.
Yep, nobody cared. That was the worst thing I've ever heard. Cut the time to 10 minutes. What the hell does Adam Silver do? It's freaking crazy.
For instance, I think you cannot legislate even. College football playoff proved it. You can invite more teams in. Notre Dame plays Indiana. Game was over in 4 minutes.
No doubt. There's always going to be a have and have-nots, and I'm not naive to that. No doubt.
I mean, women's tennis my entire life, there's been one or two tops globally. You know, Serena, she's just going to win all the big tournaments mostly. And I think, you know, if you go look at you could go look at the German soccer leagues. You can go look at the English Premier League, the Italian soccer league, Spanish soccer league. It's always the same two teams. I mean, I think the reality of sports is I read this recently. Somebody said the NBA worries about problems that don't exist. Like they said, let's cut the length of quarters. Nobody cared. It's.
No one cared.
I think
that was
sports,
horrible.
One of the things we really worry about is we're too caught up on parity. There is no parity in the AFC. Josh Allen, Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson are going to keep winning their division because they have stable ownership and good enough coaches. And if Joe Burrow didn't have the cheapest owner in sports, he'd be in that group too. So the reality is, I mean, this year I predict almost, and I'll do it again next year, I can predict the AFC for the next 4 or 5 years. It's just easy. NFC is more of a who's hot, who's less injured. But I think in baseball, the bigger danger when you have parity is ESPN's like dropping out of
Right.
baseball. Like, we're not
Right.
interested. Apple contract was ridiculous. Roku thing was
A
a
joke.
mess. I mean, just
Yep.
nothing. If the big dogs are crushing, then the big networks sign, and then that filters down to some degree to Kansas City or
Yes,
Cleveland.
the problem is, um, unfortunately, we used to call them rich hobbyists. Like, the dream is that your team is owned by Steve Cohen, who just doesn't care. He's like, I've got more billions than I can count. I do not care if I lose money on this baseball team. This is an ego play. This is a vanity purchase. There are more billionaires than there are baseball teams. I want to own one and I want to win. That's the greatest thing ever for a fan. So revenue sharing exists in baseball, right? The Yankees and the Red Sox and the Mets and the Dodgers, they share money with the Pirates and the Rays
Yeah.
and the Twins or whatever. And what is very frustrating to owners and business executives of teams like the Yankees and the Cubs is like they don't spend the money. Like that, you know,
That's
like
right.
the Pirates will just lay in the cut, take their revenue sharing money, and profit every year, as opposed to like reinvesting into the business, breaking even,
Yes.
and having your franchise value go up. That's at a minimum what should be required of these billionaire owners.
Right.
Spend the money that is
Yes.
generated by your sport on your
That
product.
Yeah, so that to me, that's the
And
bigger
that's a
issue.
huge
It's
issue.
not,
There are not enough good
yeah,
owners in baseball.
yeah. It's not that the big guys are eating. The big guys eat in college
That's true.
football, the AFC. The big dogs eat everywhere. What you have to do is force like a minimum payroll. Like you very easily, based on TV deals, would know a minimum payroll, and it goes up 6 to 8% a year. That to me is the bigger issue. And I say this all the time to the people critical of the Dodgers. Everybody can do what they're doing with that money. Everybody can push it down the road. I mean, it's not like the Yankees are going to go dry in the next 12
Sure.
years. The Dodgers are saying basically, we'll push it down the road. We'll give you the money. By the way, we'll do all-star teams. We'll win more. It'll help build our brand. We're always going to fill this stadium. So I guess this is my conservative side, my Republican side coming out. Domination is unavoidable. There are just people that are more driven, more willful, more aspirational, hungrier, meaner, whatever it
Yes.
is. Like, you just have to come to terms with it. This is not Evergreen State College, where it's the whimsical, idealistic professors dot the campus. We're dealing with billionaires, and so some of them just have bigger egos and care more, and some of them are like, it's a toy. It's a toy at a convention they can brag, and so I've come to terms with. And maybe it's because I grew up in the Pacific Northwest where I've lost my NBA team. My baseball team's never competitive. And the Huskies are good when they have the perfect coach. I've just come to terms with you have to be satisfied if you have good coaching, decent ownership, and you're viable, that may be as good as it's going to be because a quarter of all these pro leagues have expanded to cities that can't compete. Memphis can't compete with LA, Boston, or New York or Philly. They can't, and everybody in the league knows it. But those owners wanted the expansion fee.
There's definitely some truth to that. And to win in a market like that, it feels like you have to have lightning strike. You have to draft
Yes,
Giannis.
and it's one
You have to
year.
draft Giannis at 15. But it's like, oh, that's how Milwaukee got their title. You drafted Giannis at
Yeah.
15. Okay, congratulations. Or Oklahoma City, and have the best executive in the sport who, for some reason, apparently, is just not interested in leaving. Like, Sam Presti's like, no, I'm good. I'll just live and work in Oklahoma City when any team in the league, if he was like, I want to come work for you, would give him $1 gazillion and a penthouse apartment because
Right.
he's clearly the best. And he's like, no, I'm good here. Like Oklahoma City's got a shot as long as they've got that guy. But yes, most teams have a real inequity that they can't overcome.
One of the things I think being an NBA executive, so a lot of my contacts are NFL GMs and scouting
Yeah.
directors. And so I don't think people understand SGA, nobody predicted this. Sorry, nobody did. Right? He was a good player, but correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't people think like Kevin Knox was going to be the better?
Yeah, SGA was a very polarizing draft prospect. People had some real bad
Right.
SGA opinions.
Yeah. But what's amazing about NBA executives is that, college football executive, if you take out like Ohio State, Bama, Georgia, most kids stay in school for 4 years. I get so many pieces of game footage in big
Oh,
games.
sure.
If you can't, if you're take out the COVID quarterback year where it just screwed up everything. Seriously, just take the Trey
Justin
Lance,
Fields.
Justin Fields,
Mac Jones.
kid for the Jets,
Zach Wilson.
Yeah, just take that one out. No, we were all guessing. I remember that year, like Harbaugh basically shut down Michigan football. They were just egregiously bad. Belichick said, "Screw this, I don't care." Take that out. The hit rate on quarterbacks has gone up noticeably over the last 6 or 7 years. And that's the hardest position for me because so much of it's soul and toughness and leadership and intangible stuff that's hard to quantify. But these NBA execs, you're going off nothing. You can't do high school. You get basically, you not only get like 1 year of college often, but the first 12 games are against like directional schools.
Right.
You may in your conference, he may only face one other NBA power forward the whole year. And he's 19. Some players aren't emotionally equipped at that point. I'm amazed at the hit rate in the NBA draft, which isn't very high. I think it's one of the things that we just don't understand. Like, if you said, what's the hardest thing to do for any executive in any sport? NBA general managers are drafting 18 and 19 year olds. You ever thought about that?
It's crazy. I think that what it is that there is something to watching 10 guys on a basketball floor that isn't that overwhelming. You and I can go to a game, a high school game. There can be an NBA prospect at the high school game. And within, what do you think? 90 seconds? We know who it is. I do think that there is something to because there are so many people play basketball and so few play in the NBA. And then even the guys that are in the NBA, obviously there are guys that just ride the bench. Like, to be a standout basketball player, you have to be so unbelievably good. And in football, it's like, oh, is that receiver the best deep ball receiver, but his offensive line sucked, so his quarterback never had time for the deep ball routes to develop? Or did the quarterback not have an arm to get it to him? Like, for the receiver to produce on the deep ball, the line has to do its job, the quarterback has to do its job.
Right.
Like, a lot of things have to happen. It's very difficult to isolate and evaluate the individual performance within the concept of a team game. In basketball, it's not that difficult to be like, oh, that's the best athlete, that's the best shooter. And then obviously you start separating degrees. But I think that is a part of basketball that is just inherently easier to scout.